On the 20th of March 2026, Leonid Radvinsky died after a lengthy battle with cancer. He leaves behind a wife, 4 children, and the OnlyFans website. Either through luck, skill, or by being in the right place at the right time, Radvinsky built one of the most profitable internet businesses in history, an investor who made billions from an industry that most corporations refuse to touch. The company he controlled generates over $7 billion in trade every single year, itself turning over $1.4 billion in revenue and making more profit per employee than almost any business you can name. So, what happens now? Who inherits this business? Is it going to continue? Will it be sold? And what do the accounts tell us about the health of OnlyFans going forward? That's what this video is about. We're going to review the business using published information and the latest full year's accounts. And then we will look at what Radvinsky's death means for the platform, the creators, and any potential buyer. Let's start with the basics. OnlyFans is operated by a UK company called Phoenix International Limited, registered in London. It operates throughout the UK, the US, and the EU. The business model itself is straightforward, and it's worth comparing it quickly to the most obvious analogy: YouTube. On YouTube, creators upload content. YouTube sells advertising against that content, collecting all of the revenue, and then pays creators a share, roughly 50%, but on YouTube's terms, YouTube's timeline, and subject to YouTube's content rules. The creator is, in effect, a supplier to YouTube's advertising business. OnlyFans works completely differently. Fans pay creators directly through the platform. OnlyFans takes 20% of every transaction as a commission and passes 80% straight to the creator. The creator sets their own price. They fully own the relationship with their audience. OnlyFans is, in this scenario, only acting as an agent, not a principal. It facilitates the transaction rather than owning the revenue, though it does have some level of content moderation or standard setting for the platform as a whole. If I were doing an elevator pitch, I'd maybe describe OnlyFans as the Patreon of the adult industry. This distinction matters enormously, both for how you read the accounts and for understanding why creators choose OnlyFans over alternatives, which historically have followed the YouTube business model. The platform genuinely is creator first, in a way that the webcam industry had never been previously. OnlyFans was founded in 2016 by Tim Stokely, a British entrepreneur. The original concept wasn't exclusively about adult content. It was a subscription platform for creators of all kinds, very similar to Patreon. But from early on, adult creators saw its potential and adopted it heavily. In 2018, Leonid Radvinsky acquired the business from Tim Stokely, who continued as CEO for 3 more years. From here, OnlyFans leaned into the adult content side of the business. Under Radvinsky's ownership, OnlyFans became the go-to platform for adult creators, partly because mainstream platforms like Instagram and Twitter were actively removing adult content, and partly because OnlyFans offered something genuinely better: direct monetization, high revenue share, and relative freedom from advertiser pressure. Then, COVID happened. Lockdown sent people indoors. Entertaining spending shifted online, and OnlyFans exploded. The platform went from a significant niche player to a worldwide name almost overnight. Mainstream celebrities joined, mainstream media covered it, and the numbers went crazy, with the revenue going from 45 million in 2019 to 1.1 billion in 2022, a 30-fold increase in only 3 years. Throughout all of this, Radvinsky himself remained almost completely invisible. There were no interviews and no public appearances. No social media presence to speak of. For the man controlling one of the most talked about platforms on the internet, he was extraordinarily difficult to find. That low profile was clearly intentional and probably wise given the nature of the business and the media attention that it attracted. If you want a single moment that tells you everything about the power dynamics inside OnlyFans, it's August 2021. Out of nowhere, the company announced it would ban sexually explicit content from October of that year. The stated reason was pressure from banking partners and payment processors. The reaction was immediate and ferocious. The creators, who had built their businesses around the platform, were furious. Many threatened to leave. The story went globally viral. Only 5 days later, OnlyFans reversed that decision entirely. The company announced it had secured assurances from its banking partners and the ban would not go ahead. But think for a second about what that tells you. The platform reversed a major strategic decision in less than a week because its creator base, not its investors, not its regulators, pushed back. That's the flip side of the creator-first model. The creators do have genuine leverage because without them, there is no platform. The content ban crisis showed that OnlyFans understood this, even if they momentarily forgot it. It also revealed something else. The platform's dependence on payment processors is a real and ongoing vulnerability, which brings us to our next deep dive. OnlyFans lives and dies by its relationships with payment processors. Visa, MasterCard, and various payment service providers handle the actual money movement, and they have, at various points, been deeply uncomfortable with the association with adult content platforms. In 2021, MasterCard introduced new requirements for platforms that hosted adult content, requiring them to verify the age and consent of anyone appearing in content, and to have robust moderation systems. This came after a separate CSAM scandal involving a different platform entirely, but the policy applied to the entire sector worldwide. For OnlyFans, this is an existential risk. If a major payment processor pulls service, even temporarily, the platform cannot function. Money cannot get from fans to creators, and if the creators can't get paid, they leave. The accounts acknowledge this directly in the risk section. The company invests heavily in what it calls best-in-class trust and safety measures, and this isn't just for show, it's a commercial necessity. The content moderation investment is, in large part, what keeps payment processors willing to work with the platform. It also creates a competitive moat of sorts. Any new entrant to the adult content subscription market needs to build those same processor relationships and trust frameworks from scratch, which is harder than it sounds. Just a personal note here, the risk section in these accounts is probably one of the most useful I have read in terms of information given. Often these are broad, bland risks and no one reads this section, but here they give actual insight into the company and its very specific potential challenges. OnlyFans operates in a complex and tightening regulatory environment. These frameworks are worth understanding. First, Ofcom in the UK. OnlyFans is regulated under the video sharing platform regime, which requires platforms to take measures to protect users from harmful content. The Online Safety Act extends this further. It places new obligations around age verification, content moderation, and transparency. The accounts confirm that OnlyFans is actively engaged with Ofcom on compliance. Second, the EU's Digital Services Act. For platforms operating at scale in Europe, the DSA introduces significant new obligations around content moderation, algorithmic transparency, and risk assessment. This is an ongoing compliance burden and a cost. Third, legal exposure in the United States. The risk section of the accounts note that the company is potentially vulnerable to legal proceedings and class action lawsuits. Management believes that these won't have a materially adverse effect. The company is not currently subject to any regulatory investigations, according to the accounts, which is worth noting. For a platform in this sector, that's not a given. As well as all of the adult sector specific issues, OnlyFans has the issues associated with marketplace platforms like eBay. OnlyFans acts as an agent. It facilitates payments between fans and creators, but that creates a question. When a fan pays a creator, who's responsible for the VAT or sales tax on that transaction? A useful parallel here is eBay. For years, eBay took the position that it was simply a marketplace. The seller was wholly responsible for their own tax obligations. Then, under pressure from tax authorities, and in particular with the UK digital sales reporting legislation that came in on 1st of January 2024, some level of onus is put onto the platform. eBay and similar platforms now report on their sellers' activity. While I cannot see mention of this UK legislation on the OnlyFans website, they do have a US DMCA copyright content policy, a USC 2257 adult content compliance policy, and a UK compliant anti-slavery policy on their website. This issue demonstrates the ongoing complexity of operating a global platform with transactions in dozens of jurisdictions. The issues can certainly act as a business moat and decrease competition, but it's a headache that OnlyFans itself needs to manage and that any potential buyer would need to be aware of. Let's run through a quick SWOT analysis, SWOT standing for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. For strengths, the financials are, bluntly, extraordinary. We'll go through the numbers in detail shortly, but a business generating over $500 million in post-tax profit with no debt and over $800 million in cash is in a position that most companies can only dream of. OnlyFans brand recognition is very strong. OnlyFans is now a verb in many parts of popular culture. That puts it in the same category as Google, FedEx, Netflix, or Uber. I think it's got there before ChatGPT has, but let me know in the comments if you disagree and think that ChatGPT has achieved verb or noun status yet. first mover advantage in the adult content subscription space was very real. They built the creator relationships, the payment processor relationships, and the safety infrastructure before anyone else. Replicating that is hard, especially with the network effect. We know from Twitter that it's hard to topple an existing platform. You need a critical mass of people who've already moved to the same place before momentum really starts shifting. Finally, the fact that major public companies won't touch this sector is actually a competitive advantage for OnlyFans. If Disney, Meta, or Google decided to launch a competing adult content subscription platform tomorrow, they probably couldn't. The reputational risk that they face to their broader business would be too great. OnlyFans has a lane to itself, not just because it got there first, but because most of the entities with the resource to compete are structurally prevented from doing so. On the other hand, growth is slowing. We'll come to the numbers, but the rate of expansion is clearly slower after that boom that OnlyFans experienced during COVID. The explosive era of growth may be behind them. Next, competition is increasing. Now that the market has a clearly defined value, $7 billion in gross payments annually, others are motivated to compete. Fansly, or Fansly, is the most cited alternative I can see, and there are others. The fact that I'm not sure how to pronounce Fansly after research for this video shows how far behind any competitor is in terms of market awareness. Finally, the brand association with adult content cuts both ways. Yes, it's a moat, but it may also limit the market for non-adult creators. Some celebrities have successfully used OnlyFans for non-adult content. Cardi B, Bella Hadid, various athletes, Lily Allen. But the platform has to work harder than alternatives to attract mainstream creators who don't want the association with the adult industry. The non-adult content opportunity is real, but it's uncertain. OFTV, the platform's streaming service, is a genuine attempt to build credibility in that space. It's on Netflix and on Roku. It's available across many major devices. But whether OnlyFans can successfully reposition as a broader creator platform without alienating any of its core base is an open question. The total addressable market in creator subscriptions is also genuinely unclear. We know what part of the market that OnlyFans has captured, but we don't know how big that market is. As we covered earlier, the risk of catastrophic intervention from payment processors or regulators is real and arguably the single biggest threat. One bad news cycle, one high-profile scandal, one policy change from Visa or MasterCard, and the business is in serious trouble very quickly. Reputational risk is high and ongoing. OnlyFans could be a target. Journalists, politicians, campaign groups, the platform attacks criticism, some fair and some not. Radvinsky's low profile was partly a shield against this. With him gone, who carries that risk going forward? You only have to look at Elon Musk to see that a very public frontman can do significant damage to a company's reputation in a way that an abstract concept of a company finds hard to do. And the growth trajectory, slower now than it was, raises the question of whether the platform has reached something close to its organic ceiling. Again, we're about to look at the numbers. So with that background analysis done, let's get into the accounts. These accounts are for the year ended 30th of November 2024. They're the most recent set publicly available. Total revenue was $1.41 billion. That's about 8% growth from the prior year's $1.31 billion. It's solid, but notably slower than the platform experienced in earlier years. There's something interesting buried in the revenue breakdown. Subscription revenue, fans paying a monthly fee, for example, to access a creator's content, actually fell year on year. It dropped from $541 million to $470 million. Meanwhile, non-subscription revenue, one-off payments like tips, pay-per-view messages, and direct purchases grew sharply from $761 million to $943 million. So what does that tell us? Fans are spending more on individual interactions and less on standing subscriptions. That's a meaningful shift in how the platform is being used. Whether that's positive or negative depends on your perspective. Non-subscription revenue is arguably stickier in some ways, but subscription revenue is more predictable. Geographically, the USA dominates, $909 million, over 64% of total revenue. UK and Europe contributed $284 million, and the rest of the world $220 million. The US market is clearly the engine of the business. Cost of sales, which the accounts define as hosting, website maintenance, and payment transaction fees, was $549 million, giving a gross profit of $864 million. That's a gross margin of 61%, strong for any technology platform, and that includes they're paying an adult premium on those card processor fees. Administrative expenses were 197 million, up significantly from 169 million the prior year. A large part of that is the wage bill, which nearly doubled from $28 million to $45 million. That's a striking increase for a company with only 46 employees on average. Put simply, they are paying people very well and hiring more of them. Platform development costs have also risen from 11.5 million to 15.5 million, suggesting continued investment in the technology. One line item worth highlighting is the gain on disposal of cryptocurrency assets, $12.7 million in the current year. In the prior year, the company held Ethereum on the balance sheet. During 2024, they sold all of it. The prior year accounts had showed an $18 million crypto holding. It's gone now. The company has clearly decided to focus on its core business rather than diversify into digital cryptocurrency assets. Given the volatility of crypto markets, that's probably a sensible idea. It also mirrors some other companies having invested in crypto and then backed off soon after. I think this puts our Elon count at 3 so far in this video. The tax charge for the year was 163 million. The effective tax rate works out at approximately 24% against the UK corporation tax rate of 25%, so it's broadly in line with what you'd expect. There's no dramatic tax adjusting lines in the note, again demonstrating the business's ability to run smoothly, turn profit into cash without large investments in plant equipment being needed. After tax, profit attributable to the owners of the parent company was 520 million. That's about 7% up on the previous year. For context, $520 million in profit from a company with 46 employees. That is genuinely extraordinary productivity per head. On the balance sheet, the group held $808 million in cash at the year end. That's up from $678 million the year before, an increase of $130 million despite paying out nearly $500 million in dividends. This business is a cash generation machine. In the year, trade and other payables increased by $120 million during the year. A significant part of this is simply the platform growing. More creators and more fans means more money sitting in wallets awaiting withdrawal. It's not a concern, but it does explain exactly how that company's cash grew while paying out substantively all the profit as dividends. Now here's a really striking comparison. Total gross payments through the platform, what the accounts call gross site volume, was $7.2 billion. The company's cash balance of $800 million therefore represents roughly 11% of total annual payment throughput. For a business processing that volume of transactions, it's still a substantial cash cushion, but it also illustrates how much flows through the business rather than appearing on its own income statement as turnover. Trade receivables were $125 million, principally amounts due from payment service providers. To put that into context, about $20 million passes through the company every day. We can calculate that the receivables balance therefore represents roughly 6.5 days of payment throughput sitting in transit with payment processors at any given moment. That seems reasonable for the settlement cycles involved, and there's no obvious concern here. Total current liabilities were $779 million. The largest component is trade and other payables at $721 million. Within that, the most interesting line is other payables, which at the group level was $500 million. The accounts tell us that this includes the liability to users of approximately $499 million. This is the money that sits in creator wallets and fan wallets on the platform, funds received by OnlyFans that haven't yet been withdrawn. Think of this like a bank holding deposits. OnlyFans holds this money, but it belongs to the creators and fans. It's a significant number and it grows as the platform grows. It's not debt in the traditional sense, but it's a genuine obligation. This is the line we talked about earlier that gives rise to the $130 million increase in cash year on year. Contract liabilities were $20 million. That's down slightly from $23 million the year before. I think these represent the commission on subscription payments received in advance. A fan has paid for next month access to a creator's content, but the performance obligation from OnlyFans itself hasn't been fulfilled yet. This is standard deferred revenue accounting and not unusual. In the equity section of the balance sheet, share capital is $1.3 million, representing 1 million ordinary shares. For a company of this size, that's remarkably clean. There's no share premium account, no preference shares, no complex capital structure of any sort. The company was never VC funded. It never did an investment round. It never needed external capital. It grew entirely on its own cash generation. That's unusual, and speaks of the success the business has experienced at every point in its life so far. Retained earnings at the group level were $159 million. That feels small considering the business size, but that's because the dividends paid out over the years have been enormous. In 2024 alone, $497 million was paid to shareholders. In 2023, $472 million, and between the year-end and the accounts being signed, a further $204 million had already been declared in monthly dividends. Dividends have not quite hit $500 million a year yet, but it's very close. The accounts confirm that Leonid Radvinsky was the ultimate controlling party by virtue of his majority shareholding. Companies House filings showed that he owned 100% of the shares himself, though in late 2024 those shares had been transferred into a trust, which, given what we now know about his illness, was almost certainly done after his diagnosis and was a measure taken to get his affairs in order. There's also a small non-controlling interest, a 25% minority stake in a Polish subsidiary. The fact that the income statement shows that only $200,000 of the $520 million group profit is attributable to them shows that this represents a very minor element of the group. Before we leave the accounts behind, just one final and very geeky note. I really like the going concern note in these accounts. The going concern note states whether or not the company should be able to continue for at least a year and gives reasons why. As with the risk discussions, this can be pretty bland and uninformative. The note we have here, the first sentence of that very much reads as, don't waste your time, just move on. The group is profitable, cash generative, and operates without external funding. So what actually changes with Radvinsky's passing? In the short term, probably very little, and here's why. Radvinsky was likely not involved in the day-to-day operations of the company. Despite this being his most prominent investment, he did have other interests and concerns. He talked most publicly about his stakes in open source software and a number of philanthropic concerns. And, not forgetting, he had a terminal diagnosis following a lengthy battle against cancer. The accounts are signed by the one other statutory director, Lee Taylor, the CFO. Despite being a director, Radvinsky never operated as the CEO, with Kelly Blair having been in role for the last 2.5 years. The company, its CEO, its CFO, and the 46 employees will continue to steward the company in the short term. The systems, the creator relationships, the payment processor agreements, none of these disappear just because the majority shareholder has died. This was, by design, a business that didn't need its owner in the room. By allowing creators to own and monetize their relationship with fans, it creates a platform that largely runs itself and now generates both enormous profits and cash while not needing to generate content or do the business-to-consumer marketing that made it a success in the first place. That risk all lies with the creators. The business continuity risk from Radvinsky's death is therefore lower than you might assume for a business with less than 50 employees. The real question, though, is what happens to the shareholding. As discussed, the shares were transferred into a trust in 2024. That trust now controls the majority stake. Radvinsky's wife and children are presumably the beneficiaries. Though Radvinsky had expressed interest in the giving pledge on his personal website, he's not listed as a signatory by the giving organisation. He made a number of charitable contributions while alive, and there may be a substantial charitable element within the trust as well, again managed by the trustees. What the trustees do with that 100% stake is now the central question, but they broadly have 3 options: hold, sell it as a private business, or pursue the IPO route that was reportedly being considered before Radvinsky's death. Given that sale discussions were underway when he died, the most likely outcome is that those discussions continue. The story of OnlyFans and its potential sale has been running for a while. In 2025, Reuters reported that the company was exploring either an IPO, targeting around 2028, or a direct sale, with a valuation in the region of $8 billion. This surprised many, as Radvinsky had not gone public with his diagnosis at that point. The Forest Road Company was reportedly in discussions as a potential buyer at that $8 billion valuation. That deal fell through. We don't know exactly why, as no insider has gone on the record, but it's clear that the buyer and seller couldn't agree on price, terms, or both. Given that OnlyFans appears to still be on the market, the working assumption is that the breakdown was on the buyer's side, maybe cold feet in the face of specific business risks, maybe unable to finance the deal. Then, in February 2026, just weeks before Radvinsky's death, new reports emerged. Architect Capital was said to be in discussions to acquire approximately 60% of the business for $3.3 billion, which would give the business a total valuation of potentially $5.5 billion. The deal structure reportedly involves a large cash consideration, with then a significant remainder in loan notes. Loan notes are unusual in transactions of this type and of this size. They essentially mean that the seller is partly financing the buyer, receiving payment over time rather than upfront. That's worth noting, as it may indicate that the business is too big to sell in any other way. Let's think about this valuation in context. The business generated $520 million in post-tax profit in the year ended November 24. As a $5.5 billion valuation, that gives a trailing price-to-earnings multiple of just over 10.5. We don't have projections, so we can't be sure what a forward-looking price-earnings multiple would be. For a fast-growing technology company, 10.5 is very low. The S&P 500 trades at roughly 20 to 22 times earnings. Fast-growing tech companies routinely trade at 30, 40, 50 times. And the rumoured SpaceX IPO has a PE ratio exceeding 100. Add another to the Elon counter. So why is OnlyFans being valued so cheaply? There's probably 3 reasons, and they're all connected. Firstly, the nature of the business means that institutional investors and large public companies won't touch it. The pool of potential buyers is dramatically smaller than for a comparable revenue business in any other sector. A smaller buyer pool means a lower price. Second, financing is likely difficult. Most banks won't lend against an adult content platform as collateral. This limits the ability of buyers to use leverage to enhance their returns, which in turn limits how much they can afford to pay. Think of it like the housing market. If mortgages become unavailable, then house prices fall or stagnate. When mortgage finance is easier or cheaper to come by, house prices go up faster. This is not because the house itself has changed, but because the pool of buyers who are looking to buy has increased. And there's the same dynamic here. The loan note structure in the reported deal is likely a response to this. The seller becomes, in effect, the funder of the deal. Third, the risk profile is genuinely elevated. The catastrophic intervention risks that we discussed, payment processors, regulators, are real. Any buyer is pricing in a non-trivial probability that something goes badly wrong. That probability will get discounted into the price. The 60% structure adds another complication. If Architect Capital buys 60% and Radvinsky's trust retains the rest, what's happening to that remaining 40%? Maybe this is where a philanthropic donation or Radvinsky's interest in the giving pledge comes in, but if not, then the trust would presumably continue to hold that 40% with the trustees acting on behalf of his family. That creates a potentially complex multi-party ownership structure rather than a full shareholding by Architect Capital. Architect Capital have talked a little bit about their plans. They would hope to diversify into the mainstream, challenging Patreon rather than being the adult-orientated alternative, or moving forward with OnlyFans TV. Additionally, they look to obtain a banking license, which will be the first step in the pathway to minimising the risk of being at the whim of payment processors. So where does this leave us? In the short term, nothing changes. OnlyFans will continue to operate, Kelly Blair, Lee Taylor, and the team will continue to run the platform. Creators will keep creating, fans will keep paying, and the cash will keep flowing. The business doesn't need Radvinsky in the room to function, and that's by design. In the medium term, the sale process will likely continue. The trust that now controls the majority stake has every financial incentive to complete a transaction. Whether the Architect Capital deal, or something like it, eventually closes, and on what terms, will define the next chapter. With one buyer having pulled out last year, history could easily repeat itself, though a lower price and seller financing make it much more likely that this version of the deal goes through. In the long term, it depends entirely on who buys it. A buyer who understands the creator economy, maintains the platform's independence, and doesn't overload the balance sheet with debt could allow the business to continue to thrive. A buyer who loads it with leverage, or tries to sanitize the content offering, or even alienates the creator base, could quickly unravel what's taken a decade to build. When a deal is announced, I'll be back to look at the fundamentals, the structure, the financing, the implications for creators. If you want to see that analysis when it comes, then do subscribe, so you're sure to be notified when that video goes up. Until then, thanks for watching.